Evening, folks, and thanks for coming along for the webinar tonight. We're just hanging on for a few minutes just to have a few more people join us. My name is Mark Beggs, and in a few moments I'll be introducing Richard Whitehead to you. And looking after questions tonight, we have Martha for our Q&A. So I'll tell you a bit more about the Q&A now in a couple of more minutes. Just if we wait another 2 or 3 minutes, we have a lot of people coming in there very fast. So there's 61 plus people now coming through. Okay. So we're up to 67 people, 68 people now, or we'll kick off now in a few moments. I want to just remind people, this webinar is being recorded, so you will get a copy of this, the full webinar, sometime tomorrow on your email. So just keep an eye out for that. Okay, we're at 76 people now. We're at 77, so we're just rushing the door there. Still climbing, so I'll just wait for a minute or two. If anybody wants to make a quick cup of tea, it has to be very quick. Okay. Okay. Good evening, folks, and once again, welcome to our tonight's webinar. Just one or two housekeeping things. You all know where the emergency exits are because you're all in your own homes. We also have tonight we have Martha looking after our Q&A. You'll see the Q&A down the end of your Zoom bar, about 4 in from the left-hand side. So Martha's going to look after question and answers. We will probably answer as many questions as we can near the end of the webinar. If you do have any questions either late this evening or tomorrow, you remember that you wanted to ask something, that's no problem. Just either email us directly at info@davismethod.co.uk or just respond to any of the emails we've sent you about the webinar. And we will come back to you as quick as possible to answer any questions. So tonight, the webinar is being hosted by Richard Whitehead. And Richard is the author of the book, Why Tyrannosaurus But Not If, the Dyslexic Blueprint for the Future of Education. He's a Patters accredited SPLD assessor and former Senko. And Richard is the director and principal trainer for Davis UK and Ireland and has delivered one-to-one programs since 2002. And Richard has also presented on Davis method across 5 continents and conducts webinars and lectures on multisensory learning for the Operation Diversity, the University of Chester, Jamia Millia Islam University in New Delhi, the UNIC University of South Africa, I hope I said that right, and the SEND Group, as well as regularly for Davis Ireland UK. He's been a guest speaker and will be a guest speaker again this year at the Dyslexia show, which has now been rebranded as the Neurodiversity show. And that's happening in March. So anyone who hasn't been at that show and hasn't heard Richard talk at the show, I highly recommend that you sign up there for some tickets. Richard's second book, Counting on Fingers, Why Some Bright and Creative People Struggle with Numbers and Mathematics and How That Can Be Changed, was published in October 2023. So Richard, I'll hand over to you as our host.
Great, Mark, thank you so much, and a warm welcome to you all. It's lovely to see so many of you here. I have to say my kind of biography is making me feel increasingly old, which it didn't used to do. I've still got a few hairs that are not grey. So yeah, thanks, Mark, and once again, just really lovely to see you all here. So we're going to jump straight in. Okay. So this evening, I'm going to talk to you about fear mechanisms in autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. And we might almost just say generally in learning differences, in, as it were, neurodiversity, neurodivergence. Mark has said a few words about me. Here's just a few words about us. Davis UK and Ireland is a kind of a coming together of, I think at the last count, 34 expert Davis facilitators spread across both nations, both countries. And all of our facilitators, myself included, everybody on this page that you're seeing included, is a highly trained one-to-one specialist who works with individuals with a wide range of learning differences. And we're going to be saying a little bit more later in the webinar about what exactly this wonderful team of people do, and potentially how you can interact with them if you would like to do so. But that's coming up a little bit later. We want to find out a little bit more about you. There's been some lovely messages coming into the chat. I can see we've got people from a really wide range of, a really wide range of different places. But we've got a few specific questions that we'd be really grateful if you were willing to answer. My colleague Marta, who's joining us from Poland, by the way, is a very successful facilitator in Warsaw. Marta is, and specialist, Marta is, I've just put a poll up on the screen. And if you're able to go down through that poll and just let us know, it's really, really helpful to us to know what's working about our outreach. So how did you find out about this webinar? What was your path here this evening? And then also, just if you're willing to tell us a little bit about you, whether you're a parent of a child with a learning difference, parent of an adult, a teacher, and and so on. Okay, that just really, really helps us to get a feel for how you got here and what your interests are this evening. So that's absolutely fantastic. Just a little word that there are 2 questions in the poll, and you have to kind of scroll down. You'll see if you kind of jiggle it that there's a kind of little bar on the right. So you have to pull down it then to get to the bottom question. And then at the end, I think I don't have that on my screen, but there's probably a button for submitting or something like that. Okay, wonderful. So while you're just filling that in, I'll also just tell you another word about how we're going to end the session this evening. So some of you who've attended previous meetings might know about what we call our virtual coffee meeting. When we started running these webinars, we felt it was rather sad that we couldn't see any of you because it's a recorded, event, kind of public event, yeah, and therefore that we couldn't interact with you in a kind of in a casual human way. So what we instituted is something that we call a virtual coffee meeting. And so here's how it works. After roughly an hour, we'll shut down the webinar and we'll open up an ordinary Zoom meeting, which you'll be able to get to via the link that is on the screen. And I think Marta's going to put that link into the chat. We'll put it into the chat again at the end of the webinar. Okay, so once we finish the formal part of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the webinar, as Mark was saying earlier, via the chat button or the Q&A button, okay, like typing them in. But if you want to just chat with us, like in the olden days at a church hall lecture, you could all have a chat afterwards, then come and join us at the coffee meeting with your camera on and your mic on. That's not recorded, and we can just have a chat. Okay, so that's something that we're offering at the end of this evening. Okay, so let's look at fear in learning differences. So quite a number of years ago, I think about 15 years ago now, I was invited to provide a dyslexia awareness training to a group of volunteer business mentors who supported young entrepreneur beneficiaries of a well-known charitable trust. The young entrepreneurs in question, and I've been invited to come and talk about dyslexia. The young entrepreneurs in question had each been awarded a £5,000 grant by the trust. It was £5,000 15 years ago, which is more than that is now. And the role of the mentors, who were kind of experienced senior business executives who were volunteering their time. So their role was to support these young entrepreneurs in implementing their business action plan via weekly mentor meetings, which would result in kind of agreed tasks to take forward over the week ahead. Now, a number of the beneficiaries that were being mentored were dyslexic. And during the group sessions, sessions that I had with the mentors in the morning, several of the mentors complained to me that whenever they proposed to a dyslexic mentee a task involving reading-based research or proposal writing or accounting, their mentee would agree to the task, but they would come back the following week without having completed it. And there would always be kind of a convincing excuse why the task hadn't been done. But many of the mentors were worried that these tasks were piling up. They were accumulating week after week, and they were eventually going to become critical to the success of the young person's business. In the afternoon, I was scheduled to give a talk to the whole assembled group of the business mentors after the informal meetings in the morning. And after I'd heard those comments in the morning sessions, I threw away my prepared script for the talk and instead invited the audience to imagine that they were being mentored, and their mentor was telling them that to succeed in what they were doing, they would have to climb out of the window behind us. We were on the 4th floor of a high building, and stand on the ledge for half an hour. And I asked them to imagine being given this task in a society where balancing on high window ledges was considered normal, where most people were able to do it without difficulty, and where they would be embarrassed to admit that they couldn't. So what would they probably do? They would say they would do it, and then they would find a way not to do it. And the mentors got the point. For most individuals with dyslexia, reading and writing is extremely unpleasant. For some, there's a powerful cocktail of fear attached too. So repeated experiences of being, as it were, found out, when handing in work with loads of spelling mistakes, or when asked to read out loud suddenly when you weren't expecting it, or when asked a question in class about a topic that you've completely failed to understand. Okay, so these repeated experiences can make any tasks requiring literacy and sometimes numeracy skills terrifying, and avoidance of such tasks a high priority. Now, the sheer power of such fear should not be underestimated, even in those dyslexic individuals who are determined to fight it. A few years ago, I was a special educational needs coordinator in a leading independent secondary school. One of our dyslexic candidates took her exams in a separate room on her own because she needed to read the questions and her answers out loud to herself in order to fully process their meaning. This is an access arrangement called read aloud to self. As a little side note, if you feel your child needs a reader but hasn't qualified for a reader at your school, talk to your school about read aloud to self, if that's appropriate. There's a much lower bar, as it were, for getting that access arrangement. That's not really on topic, but just a little tip. Okay, so she was in this separate room in order to read aloud her questions and answers to herself. And she was also entitled to supervised rest breaks, which is another exam access arrangement. And that was because she had a history of exam nerves. Now, on one occasion, I entered the exam building to find a very worried invigilator telling me that she had had to stop the exam for half an hour. And this was because the candidate had had such an attack of nerves that she had spent 15 minutes in the toilet actually vomiting. The worst part of this, of course, was that as this was a scheduled public exam, the girl eventually had to return to the exam room and complete the paper to the best of her ability. Think about what we do as a society to these kids. Okay. Apart from dyslexics, other neurodivergent individuals, other individuals with other learning differences, can be prone to unhelpful fear mechanisms. Now, what do I mean by unhelpful fear mechanisms? Now, fear can be helpful. Anyone standing near the edge of a cliff will probably know that, yeah? So a helpful fear is one that steers us away from danger and enhances our survival. An unhelpful fear is one that blocks us from taking opportunities, resulting in a threat to our survival or to our livelihood. One autistic teenager that I worked with was extremely reluctant to leave his house, except in his parents' car. He had read about knife crime in big cities, and he was essentially frightened of being stabbed as soon as he stepped out of the door. He had such a strong mental picture of being stabbed that for him it was like, if I step out of the door, I am going to be stabbed. Forget about statistics, about probability. These are concepts we're going to be coming to talking about later in the webinar, but it was just that was his picture. Okay. And similarly, he hadn't opened a bank account because he'd heard about people who'd lost all their money from their bank accounts through scams. So again, his picture was, if I open a bank account, I will immediately be scammed. A 9-year-old boy whom I worked with saw monsters around the house. The monsters were, of course, imagined, but to him, they seemed real. He was so afraid of them that he would beg his mother to come with him to the toilet for fear of being alone and unprotected. In our work, we have encountered neurodivergent individuals with immense fear of insects, being in the dark, sitting on a toilet seat, someone under the bed, and non-existent beings generally. We've come across individuals with intense fear of being found to be inadequate, fear of public speaking, fear of introducing themselves to others at social events, fear of asking for something in a shop. And these are just a few examples from an almost inexhaustible list. So where does this fear come from? And how can it be resolved? So I want to share some key insights based on our work with the Davis methods. And the Davis methods, in case you didn't know that, are a set of groundbreaking methods that encompass a kind of a wide sweep of different learning differences. They were created by Ronald Davis, who's now 80. He's going to be 82 in about 2 weeks, I think. Yeah. And so as a preteen, Ronald Davis emerged from profoundly non-verbal autism. He has no memory of his life prior to the age of 9. He could have effectively not speak until the age of 9. And he then became a teenager, where in his late teens, his IQ measured at genius level. Until the age of 38, Davis was severely dyslexic and functionally illiterate. But a set of chance discoveries set Davis on a path that resolved his dyslexic difficulties, enabling him to read and write at college level over a matter of months. After which he developed a set of powerful methods that help individuals with dyslexia, dyscalculia, or maths dyslexia, ADHD, and autism to rapidly overcome barriers to reading, writing, mathematics, attention focus, impulsivity, and participating fully in life. Now, we're going to be saying more about books later this evening, but for a more in-depth look at these insights, you might want to see Ronald Davis's book, The Gift of Learning, which focuses particularly on the ADHD and math side of what we're doing, and also Abigail Marshall's book, Autism and the Seeds of Change. Okay. So, one key mechanism that can evoke unhelpful fear is the mental state known in the Davis approach as disorientation. This is kind of almost, well, not almost, this is a Davis technical term, okay? Understanding what we mean by disorientation unlocks a whole new level of understanding of what is going on in a whole range of the challenges that people with learning differences face. So let me just take a moment to explain, in sort of plain speak, what we mean by this term. So let's start with the opposite that we call orientation. Now, orientation in Davis is when our mind sees what our eyes are seeing. It hears what our ears are hearing. It feels what our body is feeling. Our perceptions essentially are accurate, and our focus on the world around us is optimal. Disorientation, by contrast, is when our mind sees, hears, or feels what it is creating as if that were real, okay? Disorientation can cause you to misidentify a letter, to misread a word, to skip a word while reading, to skip a line, to mishear or fail to hear what's being said, to feel as if you're moving when you're still. So a common form of disorientation that many, even neurotypicals will experience is if you're sitting in a stationary vehicle, like a train that's stopped at a station, you look out of the window and there's another train on the next platform and that train starts to move off, you feel like you're moving and you feel like you're really moving. when you're not moving. So that would also be an example of disorientation. Okay. But also a person with fear of heights, when you're standing at the top, in front of a sheer drop, you might well feel as if you're falling when you look down. Yeah. So you have to almost cling to the ground because your balance is all going. Okay. If you're late for a meeting, you feel as if the traffic light has been read for a year rather than the time it's actually been read for, and so on. So disorientation can also cause certain phenomena to be amplified, to be perceived as bigger than they actually are. So, like the dripping tap at the end of the corridor becomes a major irritation. The scratching of someone else's pen halfway across the exam room prevents you from focusing on the exam. A prick from a needle injection feels like a major injury, so you don't go to the doctors, and so on. So when a person is disorientated, it doesn't really make any difference that the spider is much smaller than you are, that the risk of an aeroplane falling on your house is vanishingly small, that the toilet seat was cleaned 10 minutes ago, and so on. Because when a person's disorientated, the mind is processing what it is creating as if that were reality. And that's the key thing. So when a dyslexic person is disorientated, the words don't just seem to be crawling or moving around the page or blurring, they actually are moving around the page in that person's reality. Okay? And similarly, when a person is disorientated, the monster that was created by your own imagination is as real as the table in front of you. Now, just a word about autism. Commonly, autistic individuals haven't developed any form of stable orientation in the first place. The absence of something that in Davis we call natural orientation, something that neurotypical individuals will usually have developed by the age of 2, so the absence of that creates more fundamental problems around stability of perception, around a person's awareness of themselves as an individual separate from everything and everyone around them, and around an individual's ability to process and learn from experiences. Hence, an autistic individual will often have the same experience again and again and again, and it's like it was new each time, okay, and will not learn from it, okay. And this is a state that in Davis we call unorientation. And fear can also be provoked or amplified when a person is missing what in the Davis methods we call life concepts. And these are concepts such as cause and effect, time, sequence, and order. In individuals with autism and ADHD, these concepts can be missing, or if they're not missing, they kind of be partial, kind of incomplete. Because a person has essentially spent a great deal of time in their thought world, as opposed to the physical world, while growing up. When we're kind of attuned to the physical world, we acquire these concepts naturally, because the physical world is governed by causality, and events in the physical world progress sequentially through linear time. And things and systems will only function when their components are ordered, meaning they're in their proper places, positions, and conditions. But thought pictures are not governed by such concepts. So the more time we spend in our thought world processing that as if that were reality, the greater the chance that these concepts will be missed or distorted. I remember distinctly taking a walk in the fields with some family friends a number of years ago, and among the party was their 10-year-old son, who had ADHD. Throughout the walk, he was convinced that there was a murderer hiding in the hedges, and he would not stop talking about it. That there was no likely cause for a murderer to be there, and that there was hardly room for a person in the small hedgerows, was beside the point. Because without the concepts of cause, effect, time, sequence, and order, you end up with a world that can be unpredictable and scary. Essentially, you're in a world where things just happen. They don't need to have a reason for happening. The monster under the bed just is. Concepts such as logic, probability, and proportion can't function without the concepts of cause, effect, and so on. So they're not available as a rational way of assessing risk and eliminating dangers. Okay, so how do the Davis methods help a person to resolve these fear mechanisms? Well, the first step in any Davis program is to help an individual to develop a conscious way of turning off a disorientation, or of establishing a stable orientation if this has not occurred naturally. This is done in a variety of ways, depending on the individual's profile and their thinking style. I'm noticing we've got a hand raised up. Do drop. I won't take. I won't interrupt the flow now to sort of take questions now, but do drop questions into the chat, or rather into the Q&A box. We're going to be accumulating those, and then we're going to be looking at those one by one and working through them when we get to the end. So thanks for your engagement with that. Okay, so we start with a tool to help a person to develop a kind of a conscious, intentional way of turning off a disorientation or establishing their orientation. And this is done in various a variety of ways, depending on the individual's profile and thinking style. Quite commonly, autistic individuals are given a different route to orientation from the ones that we provide for our clients with dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, and so on. Once a person has acquired an orientation tool, they can place themselves at will into a mental state where their mind sees what their eyes are seeing. Their mind hears what their ears are hearing, feels what their body is feeling. Their perceptions are accurate. The 9-year-old boy who I mentioned earlier used his orientation tool to banish the monsters. I remember the program really vividly. It was one of the first programs I'd given after licensing. So the person in question would now be over 30, 31, I think. And he had agreed that this was a problem. He was plagued by this problem. He wanted to solve it. And after he'd had a few days of practice with his orientation tool in the program, I asked him if there was a way that he could call up a monster but still feel safe. And he thought for a moment and he said, well, I could build a fence around us. And so he did that. He built a fence around us in his imagination. And he then summoned a monster. And I remember there was this kind of moment of fear that I saw kind of go through him. Then he remembered the fence, and the feeling of safety conveyed by the fence made him calm enough to be able to use his orientation tool. And as soon as he did so, he kind of went, hey, you're not real. Yeah. So he recognized that it was his imagination, not his real eyes, that was seeing the monster. Okay. In other words, that it wasn't real. And immediately after his Davis program, his mother reported that the fear of monsters had gone and that he was moving around the home freely and unaccompanied. And once a person has a stable orientation mechanism, we use a combination of creative and explorative media to fill in the missing concepts that have been making the world seem scary and unpredictable. The first step is the idea of change, which you'll see at the top of that kind of diagram that I just put up there. Okay. Change is just quite simply the idea of something becoming something else. The person makes a model of the idea of change in white plasticine clay, together with the word, like you're seeing in that photo. Okay. And then many simple examples of change are explored in the environment, keeping it really, really simple and neutral. Things like, kind of no-brainers, like light off becoming light on, tap off becoming tap on, door open becoming door closed, and so on. After that, we can explore how and why change happens, which is what we call consequence, okay, or causality. And consequence can be broken down into cause and effect, or alternatively into before and after. After that, we can then move on to more advanced ideas, such as measuring how long between a before and an after, which is what we call time. In this model, the photo that's just come up, if you can see bottom right where it says time, you've got a person who is sowing seeds which grow into plants. So before, there were seeds. after there were plants. You can see there's a little consequence model inside of the time model. Yeah. Then we figure, okay, what do we need to measure? How long does it take to get from the before to the after? We'll need a calendar. So there's two copies of a calendar in the model, that kind of rectangular slab thing, a calendar at the before and a calendar at the after. And that indicates that we're measuring how long it takes. But how do calendars work? How come you go into a shop and all the newspapers say the same date? How come my calendar says the same as your calendar? It's because the calendar is set by the orbit of the Earth around the sun. That's like the big master calendar, or what we call the standard. Okay, so we've also got the Earth orbiting the sun in the model to show that this measurement is occurring in a kind of a standardized way. Okay, now often individuals with autism and ADHD, and sometimes those with dyslexia, can really struggle with the concept of time. With many of my clients, alongside the clay modeling process and other explorations, I conduct a demonstration with a globe and a lamp to explore first how the Earth's rotation creates night and day, and then secondly, how the Earth's orbit around the sun creates the seasons. I don't do it that fast, by the way, that's sped up. So this process led the mother of one 11-year-old boy whom I worked with a couple of years ago to tell me that I had ruined the family holiday. So right after our session on time, the family went abroad for a short break. Whereas in the past, the boy would have been simply kind of in the now, with no real sense of time until the day of departure arrived. Now he was running like a mental countdown clock. So it was like, Mum, we've only got 3 days left. Mum, we've only got 2 days left. Mum, we're leaving in 6 hours. And when I next saw the boy, he got hold of my globe and lamp and he said, right, I want to tell you about how we went on holiday. Where's your globe? Took it down off the shelf, turned the lamp on, and he enthusiastically said, okay, so we left home. It was really dark. It was 3 a.m. Where will that be? And he positioned the globe so that it was so that the UK was where it would be on as the axis is turning when it's 3 a.m. Then he turned the globe and he said, and so then when we got to the airport, it was 7 a.m. And then we took off at 10 a.m. And he was turning the globe accurately because we'd done this in the sessions to show, okay, this is what's actually going on with the world as time is flowing. So I think for the boy's mother, the negative effect on the family holiday was kind of compensated by the fact that he'd grasped time in a way that he never had done before. And I've heard subsequently from the family that those those gains, that grasping of time has stayed with him and has grown and built, since the program. Okay. Now, with individuals on the autistic spectrum, and for individuals with executive function restrictions and or emotional intelligence challenges, we work through a more extended range of concepts that includes the mechanics of our perception, thinking, and experience, and the mechanics of emotion, intention, and motivation. Now, we'll just focus in on this for a moment. What we've got here is a construction here that starts, we work through these from the bottom up. We actually start with a model for self and for the idea of self, which we're not seeing on this diagram, but that comes first of all. Then we look at change. As I was saying earlier, on top of change, we build consequence. On top of consequence, we then build these more advanced concepts of time, sequence, and order. And this then gives us a kind of a basic map of how the physical world, of the fundamental laws that govern the physical world. Then when we move over to what we call the second construction, this is much more about how our mental world works, how our perceptions interact with our thoughts, and how we accumulate experiences. Okay. Then the third column is then looking at how our urges and instincts work. Okay, the mechanics of our emotion, our wants, need, and tension, and how ultimately all of this then builds up to the idea of motivation, together with ability and control, to then, which when you put them together, you have the idea of responsibility, which in Davis we define responsibility as motivation and ability to control. And the final responsibility model will look something like what you're seeing on the screen. Okay, now this won't make very much sense to you just looking at it, but it's something that we've built up with the person we're working with gradually, making sure that each element of what's there makes sense to the individual, and it becomes like a map of what responsibility is and all of its components. Okay, and once a person is equipped to think with these new concepts, they can be used to analyze problem scenarios where you felt had been out of control. So back to the boy who was afraid of opening a bank account. We did a process involving responsibility with him. Okay, and he, in that process, realized that he could equip himself with skills and insights that would protect him from being scammed. So we opened up the internet, and when he started realizing, okay, there's things I can do that will stop this happening. I can do this, 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 this. He was like, okay. And he then opened a bank account. He also researched knife crime, and he realized that it mostly occurred in certain districts of the city where he lived and after dark. And he researched strategies for keeping safe. And after that, he started using public transport to get to and from his college each day. Now, for some dyslexic learners, years of negative, sometimes terrifying experiences of formal testing have embedded a fear mechanism that triggers automatically whenever a formal test occurs. One 18-year-old learner whom I supported in my role as a school special educational needs coordinator suffered extreme panic attacks during timed tests. This was a different person from the one I talked about earlier. Okay, hers were so powerful that when one came on, she needed a supervised rest break, typically lasting an hour. So the exam access arrangements people were saying, you can't give rest breaks, beyond 25% of the total exam time. And we were going, none of that. She is not going to be in a state to be able to demonstrate her knowledge and intelligence for an hour. So we're going to let her rest for an hour. Okay. But even after that 1 hour, she could kind of return to the exam. She had regained sufficient composure to think, which she couldn't do before. But naturally, her performance was not going to be the same as it would have been had she not had the panic attack. It was going to affect her essentially for the rest of the day. And so I gave this learner an orientation tool, as well as a Davis technique called release, which is a simple but powerful technique for eliminating stress, tension, and anxiety. And we then worked through all of the concepts that I showed you on the screen before as far as responsibility. And at the end of the process, she made a model in clay showing herself. I don't know if you'll be able to see this in here, but at the center of this model, this is a model representing herself taking a test. Okay. There's a bubble that comes out of her head, and that is what we call a thought bubble. Okay, this is also a thought bubble. There's also a bubble coming out of her chest, which in Davis is a feeling bubble. Okay. So she was making a model essentially showing herself taking a test along with her thought processes and her feelings. Making it in clay meant she could examine what was going on in her, as it were, from the outside. And she then adapted the model to create a different set of thoughts and feelings that would lead to success. And then there kind of came a moment where looking at the model made her feel calm and excited about actually succeeding. And then she put into the model a thought bubble with a mini version of that model, so that she was then sort of modeling herself sitting in the exam, remembering the model that she had made here as a kind of a counter force against what had been going on before. Okay. So in her case, after this process, she never again needed separate invigilation or rest breaks. I remember she had a set of trial exams, which were an intensive block of exams run over a week for the International Baccalaureate. And I said, look, we'll save you a seat in the separate invigilation just in case you need it. Okay, but she said, no, I want to do it in the main exam hall. And I said, okay, well, here's your insurance policy just in case. And we didn't hear from her for the whole week. And afterwards she said, yeah, it was fine. And then she took her final international baccalaureate examinations in the main examination hall without any support. And I remember her parents coming up to me at a leavers do at the end of term, thanking me for the work that we'd done. And she said that what you did for my daughter was as significant as all the actual education she received, because now she's lost her fear of these things and she can move into higher education, you know, kind of as a resilient, independent learner. So the Davis methods offer a whole suite of one-to-one programs that Davis facilitators can offer to help you or your child. There are two kind of types of Davis facilitator. There are two breeds of us, if you like, in the world. Okay, Davis dyslexia facilitators can help you or your child master reading, writing, also attention focus, and maths and numeracy. Then there's a group of individuals called Davis Autism Approach and Concepts for Life facilitators and coaches. And those individuals offer programs addressing the difficulties experienced by both verbal and nonverbal autistic individuals, as well as to help improve executive function for non-autistic individuals who've just sort of hit an invisible ceiling, possibly without any formal diagnosis. Okay. Now, most of our facilitators will allow you to spread the cost of a program. And that means that the lifelong benefits of a dyslexia or an attention mastery program, for example, can be available at a cost of £288 a month for 10 months. And then that's it. So it's an interest-free arrangement that it's not, because it's not run through a kind of a credit agency, it's a direct arrangement just with us that we've managed to sort of set up informally in order to just help the affordability of the program. Okay. And that would cover a complete dyslexia program or a complete attention program, or for that matter, Foundations for Reading program. Okay. Some of the other programs, such as maths and the autism suite, would require a longer time commitment by you and by the facilitator, and therefore there would be a kind of a proportionately higher monthly cost. But we're not looking at something that is, you know, that is extreme. We also, in cases of you know, financial constraints and affordability, please talk to us about bursaries, because we have a sister organization called Gifts for Dyslexia, which is a small registered charity which exists in order to assist when you know, the cost of a program would be a barrier to a person having a program. Gifts for Dyslexia is, I emphasize, a small charity. It can only assist subject to, you know, the funds that it has available. But if that is a barrier, please talk to us, and you know, we're keen to help. We want to make this available to anybody who really needs it. Okay, and if we contrast, I mean, I think just one thing I want to say is that it's a finite commitment. So this is not, you know, years and years of tutoring. Okay, what we're aiming to do in each of our programs is to render you independent by the end of the program, so that you don't need us anymore after the program is finished, at least not for that range of things that we were offering. Okay. Okay, so when we want to invite you to book an expert consultation with a member of our wonderful team. Okay, now the consultation is delivered free of charge. Okay, so this is a complimentary service that we offer for typically, you know, sort of up to 30 minutes. Okay, and we've got a kind of a, if I'm going to ask Marta just to pop another kind of form up onto the screen, okay, which you can use if you would like to request one of these from us. I want to just tell you a little bit about why you might want to book a consultation. Okay. As
Please just scroll down the survey, okay? It's longer.
Yeah, please do sort of continue to scroll down. So if you book a consultation, then you'll be contacted by a facilitator. We'll find the person kind of most local to you, okay, who will then spend up to half an hour listening to you, talk about your needs or your child's needs. Okay. They'll then also let you know what are the options for help within the Davis solutions. So you'll often get, insights within that consultation, which are things that you've not thought about or heard about before that have value in themselves. But then in particular, it'll be your kind of roadmap to how Davis, might be able to help. We have, a really wide range of different programs and also other services such as workshops, home kits and so on, tailored to each person's, particular needs. Okay. And so in that consultation, one of our colleagues will advise you on, how they might be able to help if you so wish. And then if you want, you can book in for a more in-depth face-to-face consultation that we call an initial program assessment. That comes at a cost of £160. And it's typically about 2 hours in duration, and it will enable your facilitator to take a detailed case and then to give you kind of an informed view of what Davis solution is going to be the best fit for you or your child. So they'll tell you what benefits to expect. And also if a Davis solution doesn't seem suitable, they'll tell you that too. Okay. Great. So we're seeing some answers coming in there, which is super. We're going to leave it up on the screen for a little while longer. We're seeing 10 of you have replied, but there's quite a number more of you in the meeting. So we want to give you all a chance to just have a think of, okay, would this be useful? Yeah. Okay. And as you then go on down the questions, if you say yes, we want to be sensitive to calling you at a convenient time. So we're giving you options for saying, please call me morning or afternoon or evening. You can also put in the comments if you say, you want to say, please never call me on a Friday or whatever. Okay. And so that, and then we just want to make contact. So it'll be your opportunity then to have a really sort of quality individual chat about your needs with one of our expert team. All right. Okay. So while you're filling that in, I also just want to say a word about our support offer to you this evening. Okay, so some of you might have seen an email that we sent out a couple of days ago saying that we wanted you to come away from this evening with the opportunity to actually put some things into practice. We've given you a kind of a good overview, I think, of where we see fear mechanisms as coming from, how we succeed in resolving them. But if you want to actually put into practice, some of what we've given you, you may want to approach one of our facilitators via the consultation route. Please, do that anyway. The consultation is going to be valuable to you. Okay. But you might also want to get hold of one of our Davis books. Okay. So Ronald Davis's book, The Gift of Dyslexia, apart from giving kind of unique and invaluable insights into how dyslexia is a gift and a problem at the same time, and how the gift side and the problem side are two sides of the same coin, and how exactly they relate to each other. But also that book contains a complete user's manual, essentially a complete guide to all of the basic Davis dyslexia procedures. So when I was talking earlier about the orientation technique as a technique for showing somebody how to switch off a disorientation, you can find fully scripted in the book are two main orientation techniques called orientation and alignment. And if you feel plucky enough, you can actually, and the person you're working with is willing to experiment, you can actually sit down with the book and have a go. Okay. If you're considering booking a Davis program, then this book will be a real in-depth education into why what we're doing works. So a lot of people start by getting that book. They start reading it. They feel, wow, he's talking about my child, or he's talking about me. This resonates. Okay. So we want to give you the opportunity to test that out for yourselves, to get hold of that book and see how you feel about it once you've had a look at it. There is also a version on Audible as an audiobook, We don't have any influence over that this evening, but if you prefer to use an audiobook, then look it up on Audible. Okay. If you're interested, if you want to know more about, the reality of a child with a learning difference in a school, then my book, Why Tyrannosaurus But Not If, might be useful to you, because that covers a lot of similar ground to the gift of dyslexia, but from a perspective like it looks at some of the common things that will occur to a child inside of a school when they have a learning difference. Okay, and what's been going wrong for them in their schooling, and then how that can be put right using the Davis approach. So you've got in there kind of my special educational needs coordinator experience fused with my Davis experience, if you like, to give you a sense of that. And if you're interested in maths, then Counting on Fingers, it's not a complete guide to our maths approach, but you've got a number of substantial procedures in there, including some around the concepts, which you can access. Now, what we've been able to do is we've been able to kind of get hold of 20 copies of each of these books, available to offer to you at 50% of the normal retail price. Okay, so the gift of dyslexia is normally $14.99. Then, while we've got those 20 copies on our website, you can get it for $7.49 probably, or $7.50. Yeah. Okay, my book's normally $12.99, and that's come down to $6.50, and so on. You can get a copy of all 3 books at half price if you so wish. Okay, and if you want to do that, then all you have to do, quite simply, is go onto our website and click the shop button, or alternatively, you can go straight to davismethod.co.uk/shop. I think Marta's going to drop that link into the chat for you. Okay, and then you'll see our best-selling books. You just have to scroll slightly down the page. There's some kits there as well. If you're ambitious and you want to do a kind of a whole home kit type thing, you can do that. But otherwise, the books are there. You can add to the cart whichever ones you want. Then you go to the checkout, and at the checkout, you then input this coupon code webinar50. Okay, you might be able to see that down here where it says enter promo code webinar50. That will then give you the discount. If you're in the UK or Ireland, it will give you free postage. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. All right. Now, just a couple of things to let you know, a couple of things that are coming up. While we're just finishing off, and while some of you are still filling in, I can see some of you are still filling in the consultation form, which is really great. So do carry on doing that if you're mid-form. And we just wanted to let you know a couple of things that are coming up as kind of national events. So at the beginning of September, I'm going to be running a Davis Autism Approach workshop. And this is a complete immersive workshop, hands-on, that introduces you to the full range of the Davis Autism Approach strategies. It's a 40-hour training, so not to be sneezed at. And it's run over 2 weeks because it's so extensive, 40 hours. We do 4 hours a day, 9 till 1, Monday to Friday, 2nd to the 6th of September, and then we come back the following week to do the 9th to the 13th. So if that's a possibility for you, that also means it's quite accessible to anyone in time zones across Asia as well. Yeah, because we're done by 1 p.m. UK time. Right. So if that's of interest to any of you, then you can I think Marta's going to drop into the chat the link that you can use in order to explore this, and then potentially to sign up if you're interested in doing so. And then later in the same month, it's going to be a busy month for me, isn't it? I'm running a gift of dyslexia workshop, a Davis gift of dyslexia workshop, and that similarly is a fully immersive, hands-on induction into the full range of Davis dyslexia techniques. Okay, that's running from 9 till 4:30 daily for 5 days, from the 24th to the 28th of September. And that one also serves as the first step of the Davis Dyslexia Facilitator training. So if you're interested in a career in Davis, this would be your first step for David's dyslexia. This would be your first step for David's autism. Okay, so, but both workshops are also suitable for parents and for professionals who just want to enrich their existing work, teachers, therapists, and so on. And I just thought I'm just going to briefly show you a mother's comments about the Davis autism approach. This is a very short video, okay, and just about the effect on her son when he had done a Davis program.
It's a sense that he's actually been able to become the person that he is, to develop a real sense of self and to become the person who he is. It's sort of been locked inside. Somehow the Davis program has unlocked all of the resources and the strengths that are within Isaac and enabled him to take those strengths and to use the strengths that he intrinsically has and the skills that the Davis program locks into, that enables him to relate to the world and to develop confidence and independence in a way that we haven't seen with other programs.
Great. And then also a word now from a mother who attended the Davis Gift of Dyslexia workshop about you know, the results that her son experienced when she started applying Davis dyslexia with him.
I started trying out some of the strategies. So for instance, the orientation, finding the orientation points. He was so open to all of the exercises, and he just suddenly started showing that he was working with what he needed to be working with and sort of making even more progress. They absolutely work. And not only that, I mean, I have seen my child go from having almost no attention span to being able to have excitement for his learning and joy for his learning. He, instead of feeling sad that knowing that he's behind, he now feels that he too has tools that he can implement and make good progress. And he's really proud of himself, really proud of himself. And I'm very proud too.
Okay. So that's just a little word about that. And I think now I want to end the formal part of the webinar with what I always call my goosebumps quote by Ron Davis. This is what Ron writes at the end of the Gift of Dyslexia book, and it kind of electrified me the first time I saw it. And I just love sharing this. And this is what Ron talks about the gift of dyslexia, or even you could talk generally about the gift of neurodiversity as being the gift of mastery. And so mastery in Davis is the highest form of learning. And what Ron says is that when someone masters something, it becomes a part of that person. It becomes part of the individual's thought and creative process. It adds the quality of its essence to all subsequent thought and creativity of the individual. So thank you for listening to the formal part of this evening. We're going to move on now to take any questions that you might have before we then move over to the coffee meeting to do more informal, answer questions in a more informal setting. Okay, so we've got a question here. It says, my son, 7, is diagnosed with DCD and sensory processing difficulties. He's also hypermobile. He struggles with writing and over the past year has often opted not to engage in classwork, particularly where it involves writing. He also appears to be perfectionist and tends to avoid tasks if he doesn't think he's going to be very good at it. He's very anxious. Do you think fear could be behind his reluctance to engage or accept demands? It certainly could be. There's probably a number of different strands going on here. What I would recommend would be to, have we still got the consultation poll open? Or have we closed it now? Well, what I would recommend, I think, would be to book a consultation with us. Yeah, because you really need a kind of an in-depth chat with one of our facilitator team to get to the bottom of something like this. Marta, I don't know if you're able to just pop the link to the consultation form on the website, if you're able to pop that into the chat, just in case there's anybody who wasn't able to fill that in. So, I mean, if we unpick just very briefly some of what you've talked about, DCD, as it were, dyspraxia can is probably linked with his difficulties with writing. Okay, but dyspraxia, I speak myself as somebody with a dyspraxic background, by the way, can also bring a whole load of other issues around sequencing of things, around being kind of lost in space, losing your way, that sort of thing. It can also be sometimes, I have occasionally come across learners with dyspraxia where tasks that required them to organize material, as it were, spatially in their mind, would also be extremely difficult. So a dyspraxic individual will often not respond well to what used to be called chalk and talk. So if a teacher is just talking at you, like I'm doing with you now, yeah, and expecting you to be able to organize in your mind, what they're telling you, it's not a done deal that a person, with DCD is going to be able to do that. The perfectionism side of things is also interesting. That links in very strongly with the order concept in Davis. Okay, so by claying out the idea of order in clay and then exploring it in the environment, when you're perfectionist, it's like you have an ever-rising bar for order. Whatever you do, it won't be good enough. Yeah, whatever you do, the bar, the boundary between order and disorder is always going to be higher. And if you get better, it's going to go higher again. And so that can then be a real block to people starting things. Yeah. So the combination of dyspraxia and perfectionism can cause real difficulty actually starting a task for a person. And that's going to need the clay and the concepts, most definitely, along with an orientation tool and some physical activities that start to resolve the dyspraxic side of things. Okay. Marta, do you have anything to add to that? No. Okay. So another question. Some of what you were discussing around mention, I don't know, appears to relate to the vestibular system. Is that what you work on? No, we don't directly work on the vestibular system. We do have a set of exercises which use balance, but which use physical balance in order to fine tune what we call your orientation. That's probably a little bit too complex to explore in depth here. The Gift of Dyslexia book gives you quite a lot of detail on how that works, but we do use balance as a tool to get a person into optimal perception and to be able to sense what it feels like in your mind and in your body when you're in optimal perception. The more clearly you can feel with your whole being what it is to be in focus or in orientation, the easier it's going to be for you to find your way back into that state anytime you need to. And so that's kind of part of what we do there. Okay, so that's probably not a direct answer to the question, but that's what we do. Another question, my son has learned how to orientate using the alignment tool. Alignment is one of the 2 Davis orientation tools. He uses it when we do trigger word mastery and reading exercises, but says he doesn't like being in this state. He prefers being disorientated. He has fears of fire and monsters and darkness. How can I help him to use his orientation tool in these situations if he doesn't like it? Okay, there is a particular issue that can occur with an individual, with a fearful individual who has kind of misunderstood one particular element of alignment. Okay, it sounds from what you're saying as if he may have misunderstood one element of alignment, and alignment itself is setting off a fear mechanism. It's quite easily remedied if that's the case. What I would suggest is if you reach out to your son's original facilitator and or to me, or then we can really to the original facilitator first. We can then guide you on that. I'm kind of I'm talking superficially here because I don't know your son and exactly what's going on here, but my hunch is that it's to do with that. So I would say go back to the original facilitator who knows your son and did the program, and then ask, and then there is likely to be a fairly simple fix to that. Okay. What does release feel like then? Okay. Well, the release procedure is in the book. Release, that's an interesting question. What does release feel like? It feels like a letting go of every single piece of tension in the body when you do it. Okay, it's a very simple technique. Okay, but it's just kind of okay. And when you do that in your body, then your mind can follow. Okay. All of the Davis tools are designed to be quick and simple. Okay. We don't really want to do we don't want to do a relaxation technique that takes 10 minutes to do, if we can do one that takes a minute. And we don't want to do one that takes a minute if we could do one that takes a second. Release, once you get used to it, takes about a second to do. And because it's instantaneous, you can use it in any circumstances. Same with your orientation tool. Same with what we call the dial. It's like click and you've used it. Okay, so it becomes very easy to use. Okay, another question. The implications of what you are saying seems to me to have huge implications for mental health problems, e.g. schizophrenia, where a patient genuinely, e.g. hears voices or sees things that are not there. How do you think what you were saying about disorientation in neurodivergent individuals is different from, say, a schizophrenic adult hallucinating who is not known to be diverse? Now, I'm going to probably have to pass on that question because I really do not have field experience in schizophrenia. And I think, and our team typically don't, because it's not an area that we have kind of specialized in. I can see in theory the commonality between what we're talking about, you know, here in disorientation and schizophrenia, but I think schizophrenia is a state that is far more extreme. But I really don't know what I'm talking about in that area, so I'm going to pass on that one. Okay. Is there still value reading about support for dyslexia if one has learning language difficulties which are not actually dyslexia? Now, again, that would be really a question for an initial consultation, okay? Because in a generalized way, we can't really answer that. We need to get into the specifics of what exactly is going on for the individual that you're talking about. Yeah, learning or language difficulties, you know, what is, depending on what we find out is meant by them and the specifics of them, it may well be that one of our other programs is the way forward to address that. Okay, and then the reading might then just follow on in its wake, but you really need to talk to one of our team first. Okay, do the books and audio. Now, I'm really sorry. This is one of my guilt moments. The Gift of Dyslexia is on audiobooks. It's read by Ronald Davis. Yeah, my two books are not at this moment. It's purely a time resource issue at the moment. To get the audiobooks onto Audible, my books would either require me to shut myself in a room for an amount of time that I don't have, or for me to hire an actor for an amount that I can't afford just at this moment. Okay, so it's definitely on the list to, you know, I really, really want to do that. I just don't have a means to do that at the moment. The Tyrannosaurus book is on Kindle, however. Okay, so my son often becomes so disoriented, upset, fearful that when I ask him to see his dial, this is evidently someone who's done a program, to get him on the road to orientation, he says that he cannot. He becomes somewhat paralyzed when in this state. How could I encourage him out of this extreme state? So it sounds, I'd be interested to know which Davis program your son has had. I would say a first step would be probably to talk to your son's facilitator again. He won't be able to use his orientation in such a state unless or until he's done release. So release would always be the first of the tools to use. And it may be that the power, that there's a fear mechanism going on which will disable release as well until it's been resolved. Okay, so that when he's experiencing it, he won't even be able to do release, possibly. Okay, in which case he will need a clay-based approach in order to get to the bottom of the fear that's going on. Okay, probably most likely clay-based. Okay. Do all programs take 10 months to complete? Oh, that's a really important question. I'm glad you brought that up. The programs do not, most of the programs do not take 10 months to complete. A dyslexia program is done in a week, the main block. After that, there's a follow-up process at home that does take a number of months and that we support through a further kind of 6 hours of time that we drip feed into the process as needed. But the main bulk of what we offer for dyslexia is done in a week. For maths, within 2 weeks. Attention focus can be done within a week. It's just that we're happy to wait for, most of our facilitators are happy to wait to be paid. Therefore, we allow you to spread the cost over 10 months just in order to make the program more accessible. Okay. Some of the programs do take longer. The autism suite of programs, they can take 10 months. Okay. And then finally, do release, star setting, and couche balls form part of orientation? And must it be done in a certain order and as often as the child needs it? So, well, release, dial, and couche balls, they accompany the orientation tool. So they're kind of separate, but they're all like a kind of a suite of tools that are often used together. They don't have to be done in a certain order, but typically release first, then orientation, and then set your dial. That's how we mostly do it. And couche balls are just something that you do using your tools, several times a day during the program and typically once a day after the program. Okay, so I think we're done on the formal questions, and that means that we'll start to, we've got a couple of hands raised. I'm just wondering, with hands raised, whether it would be, whether you'd like to join us in the coffee meeting, because then you can actually talk to us on camera, on mic, and we're going to have an actual informal chat, which is more difficult to do in the webinar context. So we'll in a moment, we're going to close down the webinar. Before we do, though, we've got one last piece of feedback, one last little poll. Apologies if it feels like death by form popping up on screen this evening, but we really want to know what you thought of this evening, okay, and also any other topics you'd like us to perhaps address in future webinars. Okay, this is really helpful to us to find out this sort of thing. So we're going to have that up on the screen for a moment to give you an opportunity to fill that in. Marta, you want to say something?
Some people have difficulty with the coupon code in the website. So I think if you still have it, you can drop us a line on info@davismethod.co.uk and we will try to solve it.
It could be that the books are sold out if 20 have gone already. Make sure that you're typing it in uppercase. So webinar all uppercase and 50 with no space. Have we got that in the? Have we got the coupon code in the chat? And then it could just be copied over from there. Sadly, we do only have 20 copies of the book, so if they've gone, they've gone. But that might not be the problem that's going on. Okay. All right. Super. Well, thanks to, there's a few of you still filling in the poll, which is really helpful of you. We really appreciate that. And once we've got, Marta, are you able to just drop the link to the coffee meeting back into the chat?
Sure.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll take a moment just to allow the rest of you to pop your feedback in. See the number of people responding is still growing. That's really helpful of you. Thanks. Okay. So in a moment, once you've finished filling in the feedback, here's what's going to happen. We're going to close the webinar. Okay. So you need to make sure, if you want to join us in the coffee meeting, that you've copied the link that Marta's put in the chat and that's up on the screen, davismethod.co.uk/coffee-meeting. You need to make sure that you've copied that, or ideally, maybe even that you've opened it up in advance in your internet browser. So you could even do that now while we're waiting. Okay. Then, once we've closed the webinar, we're going to open the meeting that you can then join by clicking that purple button that says join the coffee meeting that you'll see on that page. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Yeah.
If you can't copy the link, you can just click on it, and the new
Automatically
window
share.
will open in the your browser.
Fabulous. Yeah.
It will be easy.
One thing we would ask you to do, if you do join us in the coffee meeting, it's wonderful if you're willing to be on camera and on mic. If we go in and like quarter of the meeting are on camera and then 3/4 are off camera, that kind of feels spooky. So if you're willing to be on camera, we can make it a really genuine, you know, kind of personal chat. So that would be brilliant. So I think we're kind of, so we've still got 1 or 2 people filling in the feedback. Okay, this is really helpful. Okay. So, okay, I think we'll probably end at this point. And we're going to close off the webinar, and we'll see you on the other side in the coffee meeting if you decide to join us. So thank you all for being here. It's been lovely working with you all this evening. And we'll see you again. Oh, there'll be another webinar probably towards the end of August, so watch out for announcements. We're going to keep it secret for now, what the topic will be. Thanks all. Bye for now. See you on the other side.